This lovely couple was married for over 25 years. They shared every part of their lives and trusted each other completely. But that intense trust was misplaced because purely by accident, the husband stumbled upon an unbelievable discovery, one that would make him see his wife in a whole new light. The couple was married for 25 years, but then the husband made an unbelievable discovery. Richard stood in the center of his dust-filled garage, a place he and his wife misused for years, only harboring some tools and old unused stuff. But that was about to change because Richard planned to remodel the area into something beautiful. The only thing he needed was enough funding, but that funding shouldn't be a problem. He and his wife, Emma, had a joint savings account where more than enough money was stored. At least that was what he assumed. He never took money out of it and automatically deposited the same amount every month. But let's check anyway, he thought. But when Richard opened his account for the first time in years, he was in complete shock. There should have been thousands of dollars stored there, more than enough for the garage remodeling, but the bank account was missing a lot of money and some very unusual withdrawals had been made. He scrolled through years of continuous deposits and saw that the withdrawals started just over a year ago, and they weren't your average small grocery type withdrawals either. No, huge chunks of money were taken out constantly, leaving the account nearly empty. Strangely enough, they were all done at an ATM. Richard heard Emma walk in the hallway next to his office and decided to ask her about this strange discovery. Maybe she could shed some light. Honey, could you come over here, please? He pleaded. He calmly introduced the problem and asked his wife if she knew anything more about it. He expected a calm and well-articulated answer. Between them, Emma always was the well-mannered and poised one. But Emma's reaction was far from what he expected. His wife started stuttering and got frustrated within seconds of hearing about his discovery. Why are you bothering me with this? She said, irritated. Richard was shaken back by his wife's irritated remarks and noticed he was starting to get irritated himself. He asked her why she was being so standoffish. But the only response he received was the following: I don't want to talk about it. It might ruin our marriage. Don't look into it. Richard wanted to react, but before he could utter a word, Emma had already stormed off. She was trying to avoid having to talk about this. That much was clear. But the entire situation left Richard dazed and confused. What just happened? He heard himself say as he saw his wife disappear down the stairs. As he sat in his empty home office, Richard could feel the confusion in his body turn into anger. His wife's request to stay out of it was, of course, ignored, and Richard instantly called the bank after Emma left. He wasn't gonna sit idly by. She kept a marriage-ending secret from him. The phone rang as Richard waited for the bank staff to answer. While the ringing sound echoed in his ear, he still hoped that the employee would give him some miracle explanation to exonerate his wife. But that hopeful thought quickly evaporated after the bank employee looked into Richard's case. There was a short moment of silence after Richard explained what he had witnessed. He could hear the scrolling of the mouse wheel as the employee searched through the data on his computer. Who is E. Armstrong? The bank employee asked. Richard could feel his blood turn cold. That was Emma. The employee confirmed what Richard secretly already knew. The card used in the withdrawals was Emma's, and she had been taking large amounts of money from their account over the last year. Richard was getting angry, but knew he was not getting any answers from his wife. He had to find another way. That's when Richard made a decision he never thought he would have to make. He stopped trusting his wife, whom he blindly trusted for over 25 years. And without her knowing it, Richard followed her out of the house to see where she went when he wasn't looking. And that decision would stir up major panic. The tracking of his wife meant that he had to be careful. She walked at a quick pace and looked around pretty often, so it meant he had to stay sharp to not get discovered. After about 10 minutes, Emma left the quiet streets of their neighborhood behind her and made her way into town. But the moment they stepped into town, something felt off. Richard was 100% sure that she mentioned going into town to do some shopping, but almost instantly his wife moved away from the shopping center. Where was she going? Was she secretly going to take out more money from their account? After a few quick right turns that led them through damp alleyways, his wife arrived at the train station. Emma hated public transport, so Richard couldn't imagine she would go here voluntarily. What was she doing here? Was she skipping town after yesterday's confrontation? This all seemed so not like her. Richard saw his wife disappear into the concrete building and go up to the second platform. The next train to depart there was set to move 2 towns over, but he never heard Emma say anything about that place. But Emma did seem very determined. She was looking around for something, but what was it? Richard's wife looked from left to right multiple times, searching for something unknown to him. Eventually, he even had to hide behind a kiosk stall just to not get spotted by her. But after a few minutes of hiding, he saw the wondering expression of his wife change. He smiled and greeted someone happily. An unknown man walked up the stairs and onto the platform. He was slender and had long, dark hair. Richard never saw this man before, but his wife clearly knew him very well. She smiled and greeted him as he walked up to her. And once they reached each other, they hugged intensely. Richard let out a small yelp in shock at what he was witnessing. Who was this mysterious man? And more importantly, what did he want with my wife? Richard thought. A million scenarios ran through the confused husband's mind, and it made him want to uncover his wife's secrets even more. After Emma and her unknown friend finally released their warm embrace, they walked toward the train together. Were they heading off? It sure seemed so. They stepped into the second-to-last wagon that sat beside the window. Richard couldn't just remain in hiding anymore at that point. He had to do something. Richard wasn't thinking straight at this point and acted purely on instinct. That's why he rushed to the closing train door when the train whistle blew and bursted inside. He was now on a moving train with his lying wife. It almost seemed like a bad dream, but one he could not wake up. He just had to accept the fact that this was real. So after slapping himself in the face a few times, he hid in the back of the wagon so he would not be detected. Richard could hear Emma laughing, and the two were talking friendly. Is Emma having an affair? He whispered to himself. Richard felt his body sink in his chair, but there was little time to sob about his wife's possible affair because the train had already reached its final destination. Emma and the man stepped out, and after waiting the appropriate 20 seconds, Richard stepped out as well. The chase continued. After the station, it was only a 5-minute walk to the next stop. The two of them stood in front of a beautiful old house, vividly chatting about something. He could see the excitement in his wife's eyes as he spied on them from behind the bushes. What are they talking about? After that, they hugged once more before heading inside. Richard felt his body tense up more and more. How can this day get any worse? I just thought I would catch Emma taking out some more cash, but this is insane. The frustrated Richard spoke to himself as he saw his wife entering the home. Why is this the mysterious man's house? Has she been sneaking off with this man and spending all of our savings on this affair? Yes, the thought of his wife cheating on him was still the main thought that popped up, and he would soon find out if that thought was correct. Richard saw that they left the front door open as he stepped away from the bushes. It was his chance to sneak inside and catch them off guard, but when he reached the porch, Richard chickened out. Full force confrontation was not his style, but a window on the side of the building posed an exciting opportunity. Richard snuck over to the window and sat beneath the wooden frame. He heard voices coming from inside the house, and they grew louder. Slowly, he lifted his body off the ground as he gazed through the glass. He made sure to just use a corner of the window so he wouldn't attract attention. As Richard inspected the house's innards, he saw a room filled to the brim with paintings. The pieces of art were playful and modern and looked very expensive. Was this man an art collector? Was his wife running off with an art millionaire? All this art must be worth a fortune, he thought. The paintings were impressive, but were not the reason that he peeked inside. Luckily for him, he didn't have to wait long. The sound of his wife and the mysterious man grew louder until they eventually entered the frame. They stood in the painting room, and in front of the glass window, they hugged again. And that hug was the breaking point for the already frustrated Richard. Looking in from the outside didn't work for him anymore. You hated confrontation, but he had to step in and get some definitive answers this time. So after taking a few big breaths, he rushed in through the open front door. As Richard made his way through the front door and into the hallway section of the house, he met the mysterious man. This was the situation he was dreading just minutes before. But now he just walked past him with a determined look. He wanted answers, and he wanted them now. So the unknown man tried to stop Richard at the last moment, but before he could make a move, Richard turned around to say that he was Emma's husband. After hearing that, the man pulled his hand back instantly. Richard paced on now, knowing for sure that this situation smelled fishy. Emma was still in the art room and was looking over the paintings when she saw her husband heading her way. He was walking quickly, and Emma could see the anger in his eyes. There was no escaping at this moment, and Richard could see his wife turn pale on the spot. Arriving at Emma, Richard needed to calm himself down before speaking. He needed to articulate his words well, and all the adrenaline in his body made him feel out of breath. So after a few deep breaths, he said he knew about the ATM withdrawals and told his wife that he had been following her. But Richard wasn't done at that point. He also made sure that Emma knew about the assumptions he already made in his mind. He told her that this made it seem like she was having an affair with this man, or she was using their savings to buy expensive art from this man, or both. Emma looked at her husband and saw right through his angry facade because this emotion was just on the surface. Deep down beneath that angry face was a frustrated and sad man desperate for answers. She put her hand on his shoulder, tried calming Richard down, and said she could explain everything. Emma explained that Richard couldn't be more wrong about the situation, but she still was saddened that it hurt his feelings like this. But I am going to make everything right. Emma waved, and by doing so, called the unknown man into the room with them. He was this guy? Richard asked. Emma didn't reply to Richard's question verbally at first. Instead, she nodded at the man behind him, who pulled an envelope from his jacket. What is? Richard asked Emma. His wife said that everything would become clear in a moment. But before he opened the envelope, he had to know something. Emma said that her husband was partially right in his assumptions. She did withdraw thousands of dollars from their bank account over the last year, and for that, I apologize, but I had a very good reason for doing so. She said while looking at the ground beneath her feet, and all that money I did use for art, but not to buy it. No, I used the money to make art. Emma explained that this building wasn't just your everyday house. This building was a well-known art gallery. And all the paintings present in this room were made by her hand. All the money Emma secretly took was put to good use.
Yep.
She used it to boost her art career. The one thing that she wanted her entire life, and who is this man? Richard asked. Emma explained that this man was her agent, the one who tried to make this dream a reality. Emma didn't think that her husband would understand. Richard was a practical man, and even though he loved Emma and her passion for art, he would have advised her to be realistic. That's why I kept it a secret, at least until I made the money back that I borrowed from us. Emma fully expected a harsh reaction from her practical husband, but to her surprise, he understood completely. He understood why she would think that, but he also understood and respected her undivided devotion to this art dream. The garage remodel was meant for your very own art studio, Richard said, smiling. But there is one major problem now. After all the withdrawals, the bank told me we're almost out of savings, so I can't build this studio for you. After hearing that, the agent behind Richard started laughing. He walked past him and now stood next to Emma. Open the envelope, he said. While Richard fiddled with the envelope seal, his wife continued her story. She said many of these paintings were at a gallery event last weekend. This event was a huge success. Many people visited, and she even made her first big sale. We came here to celebrate, Emma said, smiling. Richard opened the envelope and saw a check appear. His face turned pale when he saw the amount of money. All of this was for just one painting, the astonished Richard asked. His wife nodded with a broad smile on her face. That is more than enough for the remodel, Richard replied. His wife continued by saying that potential buyers also considered many of the paintings in this room. Richard hugged his wife after that and told her he was immensely proud he would build her that art studio, but only if she promised one thing. From now on, always remain honest with me.